Good afternoon and welcome to another interesting episode of Standpoint. I am Veronica Danikboy. May the 1st is a day set aside to celebrate workers, a day when labor unions draw global attention to the plight of workers and agitate for better working conditions and improved welfare package for workers. Nigerian workers join their counterparts from across the world to commemorate the day, but for them, there is little or nothing to celebrate. On the show today, we will be beaming our searchlight on the plight of Nigerian workers and their struggles over the years. With me in the studio is the president of the United Labour Congress of Nigeria, ULC, Comrade Joe Ajeru. Also in the studio is Achike Chidi. Gentlemen, thanks for coming on the program.
Thank you very much.
Now, for years, the labor unions have been pushing for better pay, what they term a living wage. This intensified when Nigeria slipped into recession in 2016 and the cost of goods, especially food items, skyrocketed. Workers lamented that the 18,000 naira minimum wage could no longer meet their needs. But since then, the NLC has reviewed their demands. Initially, they demanded 56,000, but now they are seeking 66,500 as the new wage. Before we go to the inconsistency in their demands, let's start or clear the air, comrades, on the rift between the NLC and the breakaway faction, the ULC. We need to clear the air on that because I'm sure our listeners will want to know the crux of the matter. As a union that was pushing or that is trying to push for the rights of workers, and then you're seeing that there is a breakaway faction, people wonder where lies our hope? Who really should we hold on to as someone pushing for the rights, our rights to the government? Tell us what really happened.
Well, I will not say certain things because the officials of the NLC are not here. If they're seated, we'll discuss that issue. But the society itself is very dynamic. And then NLC creation was a child of circumstance and dictatorship. You know, before the Obasanjo era of 77, 78, we used to have 4 labor centers. And the military dictatorship then decreed that there must be one. You know, and that was how NLC came on board. Before then, you have United Labour Congress of Nigeria, Labour Unity Forum, TUC, and NLC. So they became one. And then when Obasanjo came again as a civilian president, he said, no, you know, we have to democratize this process. Other unions, other labor centers can come on board. Based on that, the TUC immediately registered. And the NLC continued to exist. But as time progressed, we discovered that the TUC had equally been incorporated into the NLC. As of today, you have NLC, TUC as one. So the TUC didn't get the alternative we were looking at. And if a union had that history of emerging from a dictatorial government, and then after about 4 years, and is aging, is not meeting up to the yearnings and aspirations of the workers, it's clear that there should be an alternative, especially in a system that even the Constitution provides. Because that same section of Section 40 of the Constitution provides that you have the right to form political parties, religious organizations, trade unions. Now, it is only in the trade union that everybody in this world, in Nigeria, are saying it must be only one. I'm not sure that you have less than 30 political parties in Nigeria. I'm not sure the number of Pentecostal churches you have, and they have not ceased to be Christians. I'm not sure the number of Islamic sects you have in the country that are providing for the yearnings and aspirations of their faith. You know, so I think it's only the labor that you see everybody will be in one center, and whether they are getting it wrong or right, it should be so. And that is why you are having the other alternative. But
you made a statement that you said that they were meeting up with the yearnings of workers. And so is it that was the reason why there was a decision to pull out, or there was a difference in ideology?
Fine. Clearly, this issue of division in ideology has been there. Within the same NLC, we used to have the Democrats and the Progressives. It manifested in the 1988 conference of the NLC in Benin, that 2 parallel centers came on board. And we have been managing those 2 tendencies within the NLC. Now in 2015 again, when there was election, prior to that time I was the deputy president of the NLC. Yeah, and then the other man was the treasurer. And then for 4 years that I was deputy president of NLC were all not even fighting for the interest of the workers. And I repeat it here that the first picketing, and only picketing they did, was in flour mills. And that was the period I was acting for 2 weeks, that we went there to picket that. For 4 years, workers were being sacked, a lot were happening. So it was based on this that some of us decided to aspire for leadership. And that was what came up, you know, after the election. And the tendencies within the NLC as well. There were people that they marked out that cannot be. Those from the independent unions that cannot test the leadership of the NLC. So that was why you now see those tendencies moving apart to provide services. And let me tell you this, the beauty of it is that, you know, the very moment you liberate or you decentralize, there will be competition. Now, as you said it, people are asking for 56 or 55. Suddenly, other people are asking for 96. They have topped up to 60-something. And then you see that at the end of the day, we'll get something for the workers.
All right, let's bring Chike into this discussion now. What are your views? A single labor union or having a variety, like Comrade is saying, that brings about competition and possibly bring about the desired change into, let's say, the plight of workers?
Well, there's a saying that there is unity. Sometimes when you have unity, people are united, you know, on a common cause, and they are committed, they might tend to achieve more. But again, there's another saying that variety is the spice of life. And that one is also a truism, you know. The reality, but I think the issue really is, first of all, to begin to look at the basis of even associations or unions, organizations, and all of that. And you find out that the laws of this country, the Constitution, and even all international statutes and conventions and all of that talk about, you know, some of the basic rights, the fundamental rights of people to form associations, to come together to hold an opinion and all of that. And so my belief has always been, you know, that as long as a group of workers gather together, bound by a common philosophy, a common ideology, you know, and they feel that, you know, they can come together and work together to achieve certain objectives and purposes, then they have every right to so do. And so the issue, you know, of, you know, division, if you go back to history, you find out that it's not as people, you know, are making it seem, because that is what has always existed. Okay. In South Africa, for a very long time, Sukosatu has been the major union, especially coming out from, you know, the apartheid days, you know, how they were quite strong and the rest. But the times are dynamic, you know, and so sometimes you have to change with the changing dynamics within society. So you now find other unions coming up in South Africa. For as long as, you know, a particular organization or union has membership or have people who aspire to work together and to come together and so on, and they are guaranteed to so operate, you know, within the ambit of the law, then they have done nothing wrong. But the only thing you will be seeking, really, is that whenever it is necessary, when it is expedient, for the good of the Nigerian worker, and I'm not talking about the leadership or whether the leadership of the ULC or the NLC and so on, ultimately for the good of the Nigerian worker, because the NLC exists for the workers, the ULC exists for the workers. You know, so when it becomes imperative and expedient for them to come together for a common good, then I should see no basis, you know, if I will see no basis if they are motivated by the desire to work in the interest of the worker, for that purpose of working together to achieving common goals, then that can be done. It's as simple as that. But one of the things I also like about it, you know, the fact that they are now, you know, working as separate labor centers, is the fact that it engenders competition. because ultimately it's about the interest of the worker.
How does this competition bring about achieving the common good?
It does. In so many ways. You know, because you see now the workers have an opportunity. It's no longer a monopoly. The workers have an opportunity to see which of the unions is working for the best interest of their workers. And on the basis of that, is, you know, unions within either the ULC or the NLC can decide that, look, we have seen that we have a more vigorous, a much more committed, you know, labor center, either in the NLC or in the ULC. It might be better for us, since we have seen the way they have, you know, approached, you know, they have gone about their duties and their responsibilities. It might be better for us to pitch our tent with them. So that kind of competition also is good, because the one that has been sleeping for a very long time, refusing to do some of the basic things that they should do in protection of their workers and so on, will now be gingered, if I use that expression, to want to do more, because they are struggling for space. They are struggling for the loyalty of the Nigerian worker. Can you
say that you have seen this competition ever since there has been this too?
There's been an upswing. There's been an upswing in activities of labor. I mean, I'm aware that the ULC has been engaged in all kinds of labor-related activities in Lagos here, in Enugu, and so many other parts of the country. The NLC has done a few things. You understand? So these are things that would not have been done before if you did not have this kind of competition, really. You know, so if they are competing for the soul of the Nigerian worker, then they must work hard to show the Nigerian worker that we are there for you. So it's not about just sitting down and relaxing and staying in the office and then collecting union dues and the rest. They must earn it. That is the issue. And so for you to remain relevant, you know, within the scheme of things and earn the respect of the workers, you must work to earn that respect. And so they have no choice. And that has been imposed on them, perhaps by the circumstances of the present situation today. But there is sometimes out of bad, good emerges.
All right, so speaking about credibility and relevance, would you say, because you lead a center, comrade, would you say that creation of more centers, when you look at the Nigerian setting, is what we really need, or is it that a faction, as some people, in the question of some people's mind, is the fact that some centers are losing credibility?
Well, I would leave the issue of credibility to Nigerians to judge, since we are the actors in the field. But let me say this, and close to what he said before. I cited the example that while I was the deputy president, and there was only one picketing with it. But I said, I need to say this, that within 6 months or 1 year, when the ULC came into existence, in fact, within 48 hours, the ULC came into existence. The ARIC was brought to its senses. ARIC, Nigeria, they almost had a moratorium for years. The workers there were suffering. No salary, no unionization. So we brought them to their senses. Today, the workers' salaries arrears were cleared. And today there's unionization. Workers, Nigerian workers in ARIC now belong to unions. The same thing with Dana. I want to pick the aviation industry as a clear case. Dana, the same thing. You know, they were behaving like outlaws. And the ULC visited them. You know, today, Nigerian workers there are unionized, and they have condition of service. You know, Cavitin and the other helicopter chartered, those ones were defiant. You know, when we picketed them for 1 week, they started on Saturday, we were there on Saturday, tried it on Sunday, we were there on Sunday. And conditions of services came out from all these places. I used the aviation industry and that sector has been there forever. Now you can see that services are getting to those areas. If I still go to telecom and other sectors, you discover that, yes, the workers are receiving services, which they couldn't have received before now. So the issue of credibility and who has served the workers is now left for Nigerians and the workers, because our ultimate aim or goal for existence is to serve the workers. And that is what we are doing. I don't want to repeat those of the electricity and the oil and gas and other areas where certain things have been done within this short period. You know, and you see, the problem of monopoly is that the other voice is not heard. And get this right, part of the crisis we had in the Congress has been the issue of the private sector unions and the public sector unions, and the issue of leadership. Apart from Adams Oshomole that came from the private sector background, it has been the public sector unions, the government-owned unions, and who have refused to challenge the status quo. And that was what played up in 2015. And you discover that those ones in the public sector are covered by status. The moment you negotiate minimum wage now, everybody complies. At the end of the year, annual budget, is released, and every worker is sure of his salary in the public sector. In the private sector, you must fight. Even when you come with a minimum wage, the companies, Ikorodu and all those areas, you must go there to enforce it. So you must fight. Before now, when they get that minimum wage, that you must pay all civil servants, you must do this, everybody relax. But the ULC is now getting the bit of it to all those unions, where you have, and let me say this minimum wage, unless you capture it in such a way that it's either it covers everybody, even those employing less than 7 people, then we know that we have a wider minimum wage, or we have it in 2 stages.
Okay, we'll talk about that when we return from this break. Stay with us. You're still watching Standpoint, and we still have in the studio our guest. Before we went on the break, Comrade, you were talking about the minimum wage, yes, and for a long time, labor unions have been fighting for the minimum wage, for the betterment of the Nigerian workers' wage, but it's seeming like it's been a hard nut to crack. Now we are seeing that they're seeking an increase from 18,000 naira to about from 56 to 66,000 naira. And you were trying to tell us that the application, about the application of the minimum wage, that it has to cover 2 stages. So tell us about it.
Well, before now, there used to be this policy that the minimum wage covers employers that have in their employ maybe 7 or more, or 20 or more workers. But I'm saying that we should have an all-encompassing minimum wage at national minimum wage that will cover every worker, which means if I have a megad in my house that works for me, I must comply with the law to pay him a certain amount of money. And I was trying to draw the line that it's either the national minimum wage takes place for every category of worker, or in the alternative, for those who don't have that quantum of workers, maybe they have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 in their employ, even if we decide to peg them at 80%, of what the national minimum wage is, at least we could have given them some coverage. If we can't take the normal national minimum wage the way it should be to apply to every worker. If we do that, you will see that we are giving protection. We are giving minimum wage protection to every category of worker.
What's stopping that from happening? Has the Labour pushed this forward to the government?
Yeah, from my area we have made that proposal and we are pushing it, to have a living wage for all category of workers.
But Achike, some have said that looking at the economic situation in the country and the fact that some states are unable to pay the salaries of workers, some have come up with, okay, let states be allowed to determine the wage they can pay, the minimum wage they can pay for their workers, than saying and having an all-encompassing or national minimum wage.
I think it's an argument that pleases only one side in this whole discourse. The people who are making these statements are members of the political elites most times. Even those people who are not within, that strata, even those who are outside, you know, who are also making the same arguments are also missing the point, really. Because the reality is that state governments are saying we cannot pay this money and all of that, and now you want to increase. What do you want us to do and the rest and all of that? And they say, look, let it just, you know, be according to the pockets of each of the states and all of that, since it's not exactly the same revenue they receive, it's not the same kind of expenditure and all of that. But if you realize that all over the country, you know, that the wages and the allowances of political office holders is fixed centrally. It is not fixed by the states. So that argument itself does not hold sway at the level of the states. But the members of the State House of Assembly, their wages are not fixed by the state. It's not fixed. The National Assembly is not fixed, you know, by the federal government and so on. There's a fiscal, you know, allocation, you know, committee, a revenue and allocation committee that sits down and says, look, this is what is going to happen on the basis of the records and data that they have, you know, with them. So why will the same thing? Why do you want to leave the workers to the whims and caprices of, you know, the politicians who have shown, not shown capacity for good governance, who have not shown capacity, you know, to protect the interest and the welfare of their people? We have seen that the unmitigated corruption that is going on in this country. And the question you must ask, and that is a job even for the journalists themselves, how much of the country's total revenue, you know, in terms of the budgets, budgetary provisions and all of that, how much is being stolen through corruption? You know, yes, they budget certain amount of money, you know, for capital expenditure, you know, some for recurrent expenditure and all of that. Ultimately, at the end of the day, how much is being stolen? You know, so if you determine how much is being stolen, you realize that they can afford easily to pay the salaries of workers in most of these other places. You know, the reality of the present situation that we have today is the culture of impunity that has allowed some of these political, you know, actors to do whatever they want to do and get away with it. And again, to a very large extent, you can also hold labor responsible to some extent. And what I mean is this, for this situation, I think somewhere along the line, over the years, the handshake, you know, went beyond the elbow. And you know what he says, that once a handshake goes beyond the elbow, then there's a problem. And I'm talking about the various labor leadership in the various states of this country.
If you could just hold the thought, we have a caller on the line. Samuel, go ahead with your contribution.
Yes, good morning. My name is Samuel from Kaduna.
All right.
Yes, I think, to me, the minimum wage thing it's good, but I don't think that's the problem. That's how to solve the problem of the Nigerian worker. I think the only way to solve the Nigerian workers' problem is to check those problems that are making the economy not to strive forward as expected. Because the minimum wage at 56 or 66, I think it will only trigger inflation. So I feel the economy situation should be checked, well checked, so that the Nigerian worker, whenever he gets whatever is being paid as the minimum wage, he or she should be able to enjoy his money as expected. That's my contribution to...
All right, thank you, Samuel, for your contribution.
So if you let me finish my thoughts.
All right, go ahead.
You know, I was saying during the military dispensation, it was very difficult. You know, it would have been very difficult for the military administrators to get away with what the civilian governors are getting away with. And, you know, it's an irony because then you had military dictatorship. You know, I think that, you know, somehow, maybe because of relationship with labor leaders at the various state levels, now, you know, that is what has made it very difficult for them to hold the politicians and the governors accountable. Because you know what it means to withhold the entire salary of an entire workforce? It's a serious thing. They can shut down an entire state. Why have they not been able to do that over time? You know, in most cases, a lot of this labor leadership at the various states and so on have an uncommon relationship with the politicians. And that is what also, to a very large extent, has given the politicians the temerity and impunity to withhold the salaries of the workers, knowing that they will do nothing. You understand? So the kind of anger that we should see being expressed across the states in this country, we are not seeing it. You understand? So in a way, that is also part of it. But the last caller also made a point. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you cannot have, we have had a very responsible political elite in this country over the years. And that is why the economy is the way it is. Nigeria has no business having a budget that runs into trillions. I mean, 6 trillion, 7 trillion. And most of this budget is financed through deficit, financing and all of that. We should be, with the kind of resources that we have in this country, we should comfortably pay the average Nigerian worker 100 and 120,000 if we get our acts well, properly. If we can harness the natural resources and all the other resources that we have in this country, we should be operating a budget that runs into 40, 50 trillion naira every year for this period. You understand? But it is just that, I mean, look at virtually every sector of the economy of this country, virtually every state in this country is endowed with rich natural resources that are not being harnessed. So why are we concentrating consistently on the same thing that has been the bane of our country? Black, oil, which a lot of people are now saying, and it is true to a very large extent, has become a cause, in our country. And so you have a very lean economy because the political actors have refused, have shown inability to expand the economy, to take, the kind of, to have the kind of economic activity that this country should be having.
All right. I'm sure, Comrade, you want to address what Chike just said. Holding a government accountable, especially where salaries of workers have not been paid for months. And that is why we keep having this issue, talking about increments in wages of workers and yet triggering inflation. What then really is this whole thing about? Is it really about social welfare, or are we trying to see that, okay, workers have enough to fend for themselves? What really are we pushing forward?
Well, I think the last caller from Kaduna, incidentally, raise some issues that has to do with inflation.
Yes. Okay, if you just hold the thought, we have Emmanuel on the line. Emmanuel, go ahead with your contribution. Emmanuel, hello? Go ahead.
Hello.
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I think the problem we have in this country, no amount of money is too much. Neither no amount of money is too small. But the problem is our politicians. And when you look at it, if a physical senator can be collecting 13.5 million,
these are the issues now.
And you have a worker that is working for the money, and it is being asked for them to pay 18,500 or 55,000 or 100,000 for them. But practically there is problem. And that is one of the reasons. A governor has about more than 100 FA, and they are paying them more than 100,000 naira. Some of them don't have BSc, some of them don't have HND. And people that are workers, you imagine what is happening. And you say someone, youth and ladies, you say they are going extra mile or going out of their way in getting money. To be sincere, it is a sorry case. And what the labor union are expecting, it is not too much. And that is one of the reasons why our government should look into this thing. So to be sincere, the future of our children is at stake here. Please, I think I am in support of the union. They should just...
Thank you, Emmanuel, for your contribution.
Yeah, like he was saying, I think he got it right. If you look at the corruption in the system, you look at what they call security vote of the governors. You look at what they pay the senators, and like actually said, it's fixed nationally that this is their earning. Now, if we are still running a federation, I don't see why you should tell me that a worker in Port Harcourt should earn 50,000 with maybe HND and in Nigeria, and then the worker in maybe Lagos or Kaduna should earn 10,000, in the same country, So unless they come up with a template, and the minimum wage, let me state this, is a benchmark, the list that nobody should go under. And then the other states are free, and I repeat, they are free to pay 200,000. If minimum wage is 18,000, the big states, the rich states are free to pay, 100,000, 200,000. If you don't get that minimum established, Nigerian workers will earn stipend. In fact, some of them will not pay. So it's not like it's compulsory that they will pay, everybody should pay 18,000. Even as at today, it's still like a dough, it's paying 25,000. Just to show that the minimum is 18. You can't pay less than 18.
But the issue that was raised where some states have not been able to pay salaries, what has Labour done to address this issue? Because he mentioned...
You see, that is why the likes of Aerofy are trying that states should come under concurrent list, so that they will use all machinery of the state to pay the workers' slave wage. And to a very large extent, the labor leaders in such states, and let me tell you this, because they are the workers of such state governments, those of them that have raised their heads to ask questions, some of them have been fired, as we talk now. As we talk now, the chairman of the NLC in Ogun State was sacked for protesting. In some other states, the same thing. So they are using this intimidation to sack the workers, the labor leaders in such states.
But should the labor leaders come under intimidation, or can they resist?
That's the point I'm making. That's the point I'm making. They are resisting. Some of them that are not strong-willed, are succumbing. That is why you see states not paying arrears of that minimum wage. Some of them have equally compromised. It's either they are intimidated or some of them have compromised to a very large. And that's why there's this mix. Because Aerofy cannot deal with an NNPC worker in Kaduna. He can't deal with an electricity worker in Kaduna. So that's why there's this mix between public and private workers. And the issue of leadership in such states, where they fall directly under the companies or the ministries by those governors, they have intimidated them. Some of them have even been frustrated. Some will remain at the same level for a long time. But the point I'm making, if not for corruption, the states can pay more than 100,000. And that's why from the center I'm coming from, the ULC, we are demanding for 96,000 naira minimum wage. And when I say corruption, if you allow the public service to work, you have no business awarding contract for the construction of roads. Check the amount they spend on construction of roads. When you have, in most ministries of works, you have more than 100 engineers, who can do. Check what their contract they're awarding for sanitation, clearing of debris. And in local government, you have sanitation officers. You have all those ones that it is their primary responsibility to do this work. Check the water boards. Check all these areas. If you allow the public service to work, the money you spend on award of contracts could be used comfortably to pay the worker a living wage. And why do they award contracts? It's just to factor in corruption.
Yeah.
Nothing else. The engineers you have in these private companies, they are not as intelligent, as bright as the engineers in the government establishment. So why can't we, in most instances, these private companies still hire the ones in government establishments to do the job? So I'm saying that we should do more monitoring on these governors. We should do more monitoring on the states, where this corruption is taking place. Why do you award contract from the Federal Minister of Works? Why?
And I also wanted to, act in practical terms now. It's good he's also, taking it from the views that he's expressing now. You'll find that, for instance, let's even look at about how many 105 senators at the National Assembly, 30 million naira a month, and this is just part of what they earn. It's not all the monies they earn. Yeah. So if they are going to pay about maybe workers 18,000 minimum wage, from that, the total, it's about 1.something billion naira and so on, or more than that. They will be paying about 75,000 workers, Nigerian workers, 75,000. So about, the allowances of maybe about 100 people can take care comfortably of 75,000 people on the old minimum wage. How much a security vote, for instance, across the states? Let's even assume that it's 20 billion naira every month across the 36 states of this country. That can take care of, on the basis of the old minimum wage of 18,000, can take care of 1.1 million workers Now you're talking of state houses of assembly, because it's always good, from what people have said, there is this tendency to always focus on the National Assembly as, you know, representing all the evils in the country and all of that. But how much are the ministers earning? Why is it that the executive keeps quiet about the money that the ministers are earning, and then instigate Nigerians to always ask what the National Assembly, focus on National Assembly? Why is it that they have, you know, always kept quiet, silent about it? Because they are earning so much, perhaps much more than the members of National Assembly are earning. Then what of the state legislatures across the 36 states of this country? So you find, you know, and that's why some of us are saying that most of these people are united by creed in the things that they do. There is a common philosophy, there's a common trend that runs across all of these people, regardless of geopolitical consideration, regardless of religion, regardless, you know, of so many other factors. You understand? So you find out that it is easy, even on the basis of the discussion of the new minimum wage, if you can mop up all of these monies that are being wasted in this country, because it's waste, like I say, they can comfortably pay this money. He talked about the issue of contracts and the rest, the private, public-private partnership, privatization exercises and so on that they do, where they sell the assets of you know, the state or the assets of the country, and the same people buy them up. The monies that they could not release to the previous state-owned, you know, enterprises, they will now release to private, you know, owned enterprises. The discos, example, up to today, they have released about 1 trillion naira, over 1 trillion naira to the discos, private concerns. But these are monies they could not give to the old NEPA because they needed to kill it. And that is the issue. And nobody should keep on all these stories about PPP, you know, private sector develop, that is the only way nations develop. It's a lie. Go and look at and ask how come, you know, Ethiopian Airlines is one of the best in the world. Kenyan Airline is one of the best in the world. These are public enterprises and all of that. It is about the will. The reality is that our politicians are not committed to this country. The reality is that the political class is not patriotic enough to the people of this country. And they are more interested in their welfare, personal welfare, and that of the members of their families than the people of this country. If they were so motivated to do well by the people of this country, or for the people of this country, I can assure you that we will not be in the kind of deep economic and political morass that we find ourselves in today. You know.
And now that we have found ourselves in this situation where there's corruption and the economic situation, as we have seen, in the interim, are there strategies being put in place by the labor unions to ensure that the economic situation doesn't seem like this 96,000 naira your center is clamoring for might be achieved? Are there strategies being put in place to see, okay, what is it we can do to help the plight of the Nigerian workers?
Well, you see, the options are there. The option of should Labour go into politics and be at the driver's seat.
Collaborating with the National Assembly, seeing that... No,
collaborating with the National Assembly would not take the National Assembly away from their class leaning. You know, they belong... Traditionally, there has been this class issue between Labour and capital. You know, the members in the National Assembly, majority of them are captains of industry. You know, they are employers, just like the executive arm of government. And they must always suppress, you know, the working class, the liberal class, you know, the artisans, you know, and they have equally fostered disunity among this class. Because the very moment the labor class, the working class, the professors, the journalists, the artisans, and the workers, all the people that earn their way through their sweat, you know, the very moment they are united, then the political class will be sacked. But the political class has made sure, you know, that they create this artificial division amongst, you know, the working class, and it will continue for time to come. I have not seen the possibility of this happening soon, you know, because of the docility of the working class. You know, they're so docile. This one we're asking for minimum wage now. The very moment we get it, everybody relaxes. You see a situation whereby the following day they announce fuel price, they increase it, the teachers increase school fees, the bus driver increases it, and there's no welfare package. Now, if you even look at it, if you keep minimum wage constant at 18,000, and then you now ask the state to be a bit welfareist, let us have free transport, let us have free education, let people go to hospital free, let the government build houses and give people, even if it's under mortgage arrangement. If you leave this, clearly that the state are providing, let there be old men's benefit. Let people receive their pension. If you keep this constant, I will tell you that the labor unions can now canvass, since these things have been taken away by the state, which should have been their responsibility, to say, okay, if you let minimum wage remain at 18,000, let these other factors be taken into consideration by the state. And now you say you are waging war against corruption, and then you have not paid the pensioner 16 months salary. And the people working, they equally know that they will enter that club, and you say you are fighting corruption. It's not going to work, because the person that is still working will think of what he could do for himself so that when he leaves service, he can even think of how to build one room so that he collect rent when he leaves service. Until you address these issues, the issue of paying workers' salaries as at when due, the issue of paying pensioners, you can't fight corruption successfully in this country. It's not going to work.
All right, now, the All Progressives Congress is holding its primaries in Ekiti State ahead of the July the 14th governorship election in that state. More than 30 aspirants are jostling for the party's ticket. Our senior political correspondent, Ayo Dele Ozugbaku, who has been on the ground in Ekiti, joins us now to give us update. Ayo, tell us what's happening at the moment.
Yes, Veronica, it's a rainy day here in Michael Olukayo Stadium in Ekiti State. At about 10:30, the rain started heavily and disrupted the process of accreditation.
And just like 80% of the delegates got accredited, and they came into this hall, and immediately they had their tags, but they are all scampering for shelter now. We just have like 10% of them not duly accredited now, and this exercise is meant to have started by 12 o'clock, and in starting 12 o'clock now, so the bottom line is that the aspirants, they are insisting that accreditation must be done for every delegate that is outside there. They have to finish the process of accreditation. No matter how long it takes, they must accredit everybody. So moving forward now, the chairman of the organizing committee have been able to give that concession that every delegate is going to be accredited, and after the process of the accreditation, anytime from now, voting will start. I must also tell you that you have the aspirants. The aspirants are somewhere around the VIP's stand there. There are 32 in number, and they are all seated here. And you have delegates according to their local government. When you see Boba, you see Ikole, you see Ilejemeje, and everybody here, and they are waiting patiently. In all, I think there are 2,618 delegates that will participate in this exercise, and 33 aspirants are involved. And when you also check, that His Excellency the Governor of Nasarawa State is actually putting logistics together, trying to get his committee members together so that this exercise, the process of voting per se, will start. You can see the backside of Governor Al Makura there, so that putting heads together with his committee members so that this process will start in earnest, and he's actually been on top of the situation, trying to organize every damn steps himself. But what is happening here is the rain. The rain actually has taken about 2.5 hours from this exercise. What that is telling us is that it will take a longer time before we conclude this process, and it will take a longer time before a candidate might emerge. But in spite of everything, they are making sure that they are taking their time. And
Ayo, I need to quickly ask you this question. How the aspirants, did you speak with any of the aspirants, and what are their expectations with regards to the process, especially with regards to transparency of the process?
Yes, I spoke with one of the aspirants off camera earlier, and he said because of the rain, and it was stated by it is 12 that they are going to finish accreditation, anybody that has not been accredited by 12, that the process will go on with that person. And the aspirant actually expressed his misgiving about that. But fortunately, the organizing committee chairman, that's Governor Almakura, has given in now, and he said all the delegates must be accredited, that whenever they finish the accreditation, it's when the voting will start proper. So now they have like 30 minutes now added time to make sure that everybody, every delegate that has business and can actually prove that he or she is a delegate will actually take part in this exercise. Veronica.
All right, thank you, Aya, for bringing us up to speed. We'll definitely get back to you for more updates. But then let's come back to our guests in the studio quickly before we move on. Another major issue, comrade, is the issue of casualization of workers, which seem to have been a hard nut to crack for the labor union. Am I wrong?
Go ahead.
So what really is happening with regards to this? Because a lot of employers are going away with really with this issue.
Yeah, you see, beyond even minimum wage payment, you know, is the duty of the state to provide regulation in every country. You know, that everybody that must do business in Nigeria, these are the things you must not do. You know, you must not treat Nigerians as slaves. You know, if you are employing 1 or 2 people, you must have a condition of service. You must equally comply with the minimum wage, those laws. But these days, we seem to have inefficient and corrupt labor officers, because that's their duty. You know, we seem to have labor inspectors, or we don't have, you know, in some factories. If you watch the Ikorodu fire incident and other areas, you won't. I don't think that we still have labor inspectors that go to such places to know how Nigerian workers are faring. So that is clearly a neglect on the part of the Ministry of Labor. And then we labor leaders, for instance. And when we talk labor leaders, you know, in every union you have the leadership of such union.
And so what is being done?
We labor leaders, even when you fight, and it gets to the issue, the Ministry of Labor, whose duty it is, you know, to tell the employers that this is wrong, this is wrong. The Ministry of Labor chickens out. You know, they are in constant collaboration with the owners of these factories and industries out there. So it's like in a tripartite nature in Nigeria, the 2 legs are always one. The government leg, the employer's leg, and you have labor. In situations where such labor unions, and there are many of them like that, are not strong, you know, they won't be ready to enforce, you know, this compliance of with
and what is your center considering? What are the plans for pushing? Dealing with this, rather.
We have a culture, especially some of the unions from there, like in the electricity sector, where some of us came from. You know, before this privatization, we were able to stamp it out. The ones in the energy sector, in Nupeng, we have been able to stamp it out. We are focusing on banks, to be precise, you know, because it's equally common, it's prevalent in the banking industry and some of the new telecom companies. We have done 1 or 2 things in some of the companies. I don't want to mention their names in the telecom factory, but before long, you know, we engage it. But I think it requires a lot of legislation. And the existing legislation, you know, must be enforced. That's my view on this.
All right, I'll take it quickly because we are running out of time.
I mean, I would have taken it from that perspective. The reality is that, you know, we have laws in this country, and the government has a duty to enforce the laws that it has made for the good governance of the country. And so the people that you find in the workplace are Nigerians, and the duty and responsibility of the government is to provide for the security and welfare of its citizens. You cannot do that when you have employers violating consistently, you know, the dignity of the Nigerian labor. And so they have a duty to enforce the laws. The laws are not our laws, the laws are their own laws. And that is the duty, and that is the only thing. What, you know, the labor leadership can do is to help the government in doing that through the picketing and all of this pressure that they put on the employers. But it's at such moments that the government must be able to stand behind the worker to protect them.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming on the program. And that's it on today's edition of Standpoint. Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you can watch a repeat of this edition tomorrow by 7 a.m. I'm Veronica Danik Boy. Enjoy your weekend.